Okay, so lesson 9.3, it's solving by graphing. So important to know here is that as we are solving these quadratic equations, first of all, because you'll learn throughout this chapter, because there is an x squared in the equation, that x squared indicates that there's usually going to be not one, but two answers. Okay, today we're looking at how we can solve using the graph. And so when we do that, we're going to be looking at the fact that the solutions are the x-intercepts. What do I mean x-intercepts? Where the graph crosses the x-axis. Okay, so what we need to do here is we need to graph this, and we need to figure out where it crosses the x-axis. Now, first of all, we have an equation that's x squared minus 1 equals 0. It is equals 0, but in order to graph this, we need to think about the equation as y equals x squared minus 1. Okay? And based on what I remember about this lesson, the good news is we can go back to the easier way. We don't necessarily have to think about axis of symmetry and vertex. Because I believe there's no x value, there's no bx, so these are going to be centered on the x-axis. If you go back to lesson 9.1, you remember how we graphed in lesson 9.1? We just used an xy chart. Okay. What are good numbers to use on an xy chart?
0, 2.
0 is wonderful, always. 0, 1, 2. This will give us half of the parabola, and then we will reflect for the other half. Okay, so if I put in 0 right here, 0 squared minus 1. What?
-1 squared.
Just -1. 0 times 0 is 0, minus 1, -1. What about 1 squared minus 1?
0.
1 minus ends up being 1 minus 1, which is 0. What about 2 squared minus 1?
3.
4 minus 1 is 3. Okay, so let's graph those points. And again, remember what I said. These are all centered on the y-axis. So our axis of symmetry is going to be here on the y-axis. So 0, -1 means I go left or right 0 and
Left.
down 1. Left or right 0, down 1. What about 1, 0?
Go to the right 1 and just stay.
Right 1, up or down 0. 2, 3.
Over 2, up 3.
Over 2, up 3. That is the right half of my parabola. How do I get the left half?
You mark on the 0.
Yeah, reflect it, mirror it. If this, this point that's on here is my vertex. This point is 1 right, so we need an equivalent point. 1 left. This point is 2 right, so I need an equivalent point. 2 left. They look more U-like and less V-like, maybe? Okay, before we move on to the next problem, I need to know, what is the answer to this problem? Okay. We talked about we're trying to solve this, right? So we want solutions, but we're graphing it to get those solutions. What do we say the solutions are? Solutions are the x-intercepts. Can we tell where our x-intercepts are?
Maybe.
What?
I missed it. No.
X-intercepts. So x-intercepts is where the graph crosses the x-axis. Where does the graph cross the x-axis? At what x values?
This is a message for all high school teachers, so they know that they have canceled our drill for today. Organized.
Why?
Is it raining outside?
No.
Okay. I'm glad he announced it though. Okay. Glad we went ahead and started on the lesson. Okay, so solutions are where the graph crosses the x-axis. Where does this parabola cross the x-axis?
1, 0.
At the ordered pair 1, 0 and at -1. So what are the x values there? 1 and -1. So my solutions are 1 and -1. You guys know another way to write 1 and -1? I mean, you could write 1 comma -1, but to write them both together, you could put plus or minus 1. Have you seen that? You've seen plus or minus in like quadratic formula and stuff.
Yeah.
So, personally, I'm fine with any of these answers. It's 1 and -1 because at what x values is my graph crossing the x-axis? At 1 and -1. Okay? Okay. Well, I moved my screen because I didn't really set up to be. I should have set this up differently so I could go ahead and do the next one too. I'm going to have to move my screen up. Start trying the next one. Okay, so if it's 3x squared plus 6 equals 0, we are trying to we're going to graph it, trying to find our x-intercepts. So we're graphing y equals 3x squared plus 6. I'm going to set up an xy chart. What kind of x values sound good to you? 0, 1, 2. Okay. So what are we going to do with 0?
Replace it. Replace the x. So it's going to be y.
Yeah. 3 times 0 squared plus 6. 0 squared is 0. Times 3, 0. Plus 6.
6.
I need to write up more work than that. Now, repeat the process using 1. 1 squared is 1 times 3 plus 6. And repeat the process using 2. 2 squared times 3 plus 6. Did I hear it? Nope.
Okay.
18.
18.
So I was right.
You second guessed yourself when you heard something different, didn't
Yes, I always do that.
you? Okay, let's graph this. And we're just going to make it work. Okay. Where is 0, 6?
Just go
over 6,
straight up 6.
Which direction 6? Left to right 0 and up 6. Okay. 1, 9. Over 1, up 9.
Jeez, this is going to be rough to grab this episode.
Yeah, I know. Can you guys deal if I skip the 218?
Yeah.
1, 9, I can handle that. And we can see where this graph is going. So 218, realize it's going to be up in your previous problem, right? Okay, just imagine it's there. What do we know, though? My axis of symmetry is here on the center. So here's my vertex at 0, 6. Then we have this point over here that's 1 to the right. We need the corresponding point, 1 to the left. And so my parabola is going to go up and reach into my graph above it.
And it never goes on.
Okay, so the question becomes, here's my x-axis. Where does this parabola touch this x-axis? Nowhere. It doesn't. It never will. So what kind of answer should I give? No, 0 is a number.
No, I don't know.
No what?
No real numbers.
Yeah. You're thinking too hard. How about no solution?
Oh. Yeah.
Since this graph will never cross the x-axis, it's no solution. Okay. Can I ask you a question here? I'm going to use this graph because it's here. You see that green parabola?
Mm-hmm.
What would the solution be with that green parabola?
0, 0.
Not 0, 0, but what is the x value? The x value is 0. So you understand that answer would be x equals 0? Okay. I'm going to take that off there because it looks confusing otherwise. Okay, so that's solving by graphing, which, I don't remember. Gosh, I did get this homework ready, didn't I? I know I did. I don't remember, graphing versus this other step where, stuff we're going to do. So this is our last step with graph. But being able to solve it, looking for where it crosses the x-axis. Okay? The other thing we're going to look at, if you look down at the bottom, is we're going to get into our very first algebraic solving. And we're going to solve using square roots. Okay, so let me move my paper up. So we have all this on one page. I don't have to move again. Let me erase this fun stuff. Okay, so notice when it says solve using square roots. It suggests solve equations by getting x squared alone. All the equations we're looking at when we're graphing today and when we're solving like this are ones where there is only an x squared, there is no x term. So good news is it makes it a little bit easier. So if we want to solve by getting x squared alone, or m, or d, or whatever letter it is, right? Okay, so let's look at that first one. M squared minus 36 equals 0. So it's not how do I get x squared by itself, it's how do I get m squared by itself. So how do I get m squared by itself?
Add 36 to the 0.
If it's minus 36, we're going to add 36. If we add 36 on one side, we add 36 on the other side, correct? So what do we write down here?
M squared equals 36.
M squared equals 36. Now, once you get x squared by itself, you have one step here. Because we need to figure out how does m squared, how do we get m squared to become m? My goal is m squared to become m.
Divide 36 by 2.
No. You've got the typical wrong answer going.
Yeah.
Okay. If it was 2m, I divide it by 2. But this is m squared.
So,
So you just recently learned how to do this on your calculator.
square root.
Uh-huh.
I'd say 6. But
You said what?
it was 6.
6.
That's one of the answers.
Yeah.
Okay, so we are going to take the square root. If we take the square root of the left side of an equation, you're going to take the square root of the right side. So, thus, when you take the square root of m squared, the square root and the square cancel each other out, we have m. Square root of 36.
6.
And I said 6 was one of the answers. Because 6 times itself, so 6 times 6 is 36. Any other thoughts on what else multiplies by itself to be 36? So my hint is, right now we've talked about the fact that positive 6 times positive 6 is 36.
Oh,
Negative 6 times a positive 6.
No. Negative 6 times itself. So negative 6 times negative 6 is also positive 36. And so when we give our answer here, we have to say not just 6, but plus or minus 6. And if you prefer, you could say 6 comma negative 6.
Yeah, that's easier.
It's just easier to say plus or minus 6. So what I always tell my algebra 2s is anytime you take the square root within an equation, you have to give me two solutions, the positive and the negative. So you always, whenever you take that square root in an equation, you throw in that plus or minus sign in front of it. Every time. Okay? Okay, questions? Okay, shall we try B?
Sure.
Or I guess it's not labeled example B, but 4d squared plus 16 equals 16. How do I start to get d squared by itself?
minus 16.
If it's plus 16, we're going to subtract 16. What do I do on the left? I do on the right. 4d squared equals,
They both cancel out. It's just going to be 4d squared.
well, but 16 minus 16 is 0. We can't put nothing on the right side. On the left side, since 4d squared is there, we can just drop the 16s off. On the right, we need some kind of number there. Okay, what's the next step to get d squared by itself? Divide by 4. So now, 4's cancel, and I have d squared equals 0 divided by 4 is 0. Almost there. If I have d squared equals 0, how do I get from d squared to d?
Do the square root.
Do the square root again. The square root of d squared is
D.
d. The square root of 0.
0.
0. Do I need to say plus or minus 0? No, because 0 is just 0. Any other number you have to put a plus or minus on. But 0 is 0 in this case. Okay. Third example. This is it. We just have to get through these two examples. Okay, 3x squared plus 15 equals 0. What do I do?
Subtract 15 from both sides.
Okay. Subtract 15.
cancel out. 0 is negative 15.
3x squared equals 0 minus 15 is negative 15. Okay, then what?
Subtract, divide by 3.
Divide by 3. Negative 15 divided by 3 is,
5.
more specifically, negative 5.
Yeah.
What do we do to finish solving for x?
Square root.
Square root. So the square root of x squared is x. What's the square root of negative 5?
Square.
Why isn't there one?
Because,
Because it's a negative?
yeah, also.
Okay. Huh?
Yeah, but also the square root of 5 is just 5.
Square root of 5 is not 5.
That's what it gave me.
Disagree.
It told me 5.
I would say the calculator lied, but the calculator probably didn't lie. It's probably operator error. Okay, so here's the deal. If this was the square root of 5, it is a decimal. 2 point something something, I don't know. So you would either leave it as square root of 5 or you would give that decimal. And we'd have to put a plus or minus in front of it. However, here's the deal. We tried to take the square root of a negative. If you try and take the square root of a negative, your calculator is going to give you an error code. And so guess what? This is no solution. And that's just because we took the square root of a negative. Did you do your square root and then your 5? Or your 5 and then your square root? Oh, it's saying it's the square root of 5, so you need to set it up. You want it to go to the decimal. You have a way to get your calculator to go to decimal. There should be on the calculator. Let's finish this last one. I'll look because sometimes you need to know the square root of 5. You know. Now, if you do try and do square root of negative 5, see what it gives you.
Oh, it says down here.
Okay, and that's your clue that okay, you can't do square root of negative. Okay. Did you start solving this one without me?
Maybe.
If it's 5x squared minus 45, what are we going to do? It's already subtracting, so we're going to add. So 45's cancel. 0 plus 45 is 45. If it's 5x squared equals 45, we're going to, not yet, divide by 5 first, so that it's just x squared. 45 divided by 5 is 9. Now, since it's x squared equals, now we're going to square root. And so once we square root, square root of x squared is x. What about the square root of 9? Yeah, you can. Square root of 9 is 3. 3 or negative 3, so we're going to say plus or minus 3. Because 3 times 3 is 9, and negative 3 times negative 3 is 9. Okay, if you got a little time, use it. Homework should be available in Math Excel, lesson 9.3.